Testing 1, 2, 3. This is a test.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our work session for Tuesday, August 8th. We'll start with a meeting follow-up, Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, good evening. I don't think I have anything for this item unless there are any questions for things that we need follow up on that I could answer tonight.
Okay. Did anybody have anything from last week's meeting that needed to be addressed or? No? All right, let's move on to community readiness grant and loan application, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. This is a follow-up item with respect to the presentation pertaining to the beginning portions of a master development plan up and around the event center and the location of the sports ranch as demonstrated in your exhibit in front of you here. I had indicated to you that one of the critical steps that we needed to take after this coming online officially and formally and being completed would be that of trying to pursue dollars and cents that would be needed to develop the subject area with respect to infrastructure and some of those utilities. Without a doubt, you read in the memo what it is that we believe the utilities and infrastructure will take to make happen for, at this point in time, would seem like a fully developed infrastructure package for this area. As you probably gathered, we just don't have any infrastructure in the near space, particularly as it relates to sewer, and particularly as it relates to accommodating a full development for commercial retail and potentially even industry moving into the subject area. Furthermore, we have utilities and so forth that would be needed by the sports ranch as well. That as a partner entity, we could potentially consider adding to an application to the business council for the things that they have in need as well that would ostensibly become assets that the city will take also as a part of this. So we've got a couple things at play here. We've got a couple major objectives that we want to accomplish with respect to an approach to the business council. As you saw in the memo, the community readiness program has available a $5 million grant as well as a $5 million loan package that we believe we can make a very compelling argument for. If indeed, however, we can loop into some of our private partners that are in the area currently and that will be in the area potentially in the near future, we believe we can make even a more comprehensive ask as it relates to business readiness and get even further support. So the purpose for tonight's gathering is to be sure that you're comfortable with our taking these steps, anticipating that there's going to be a formal adoption process, if you will, on your part that will be needed in the very near future. If you are in fact comfortable with respect to what it is that we're proposing, we are anticipating a November 1 deadline as it relates to the community readiness side of things. If indeed we can elevate our application to a business readiness application, that deadline is a little more fluid and may or may not be consistent with the November 1 timeframe that we know exists for the community readiness side of things. So we're hoping to cast as broad a net as we can, get as strong a partnership as we can from the state as well as our private partners, and see what we can't do to get this land ready for private development in every corner of the subject area that we've discussed with you thus far. We have Cindy and Alex here to talk about their opinion of probable costs for the utility side of things. They can also tell you what other data may need to be collected as a part of this process, partnerships of which we are pursuing for those pieces and parts as well. We also have Ms. Becker here to help us as it relates to the application process. And of course, we have a couple stakeholders in the audience observing what the discussion looks like and potentially what some of the next steps are and how they get it. So with that, Mr. Mayor, if I can turn the time over to Cindy and Alex, I would sure appreciate that.
Certainly. Cindy, are you ready for this?
Oh, I am. Very exciting project.
I agree.
Exciting.
I agree.
So, Carter asked us to put together conceptual cost estimates for water, sewer, and we added drainage. Cause the stormwater up there is in need of infrastructure also. And Liz asked us to include the traffic and asphalt part of it. So I'm gonna turn it over to any questions you might have. You had the attachments of the cost estimates that Alex did. He did a great job. I know sometimes it's hard, put a cost estimate together when we don't have a lot of data up there right now. So feel free to shoot any questions you have at us about the costs.
I would like to ask a question if I may. These, do we, generally when we look at projects like this and we get estimates and then time goes by and between material costs and inflation and everything else, we're in a huge shortfall. So did you put oversight in this? Do we have an idea of how long this would be effective, I guess, before it's not?
Talking about like escalation in how current these prices are.
Correct.
These prices are current as of right now. What this estimate includes.
So as far as the timeline, if you give us the go ahead with the grant, I mean, as soon as you guys would approve that, then I assume Carter would give us a thumbs up to go. So what are we looking, 6 months, maybe to a year?
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that Cindy and Alex have advised us of is the idea of getting a formal utilities study as well as a traffic study under our belts, particularly in preparation for the application process. Those studies will elevate the information that you have here from an opinion of probable cost to a much more solidified and certain view of not only what the costs are, but exactly where in fact we need to put the utilities and what may be needed beyond what it is that we've done in the field work here internally.
Where my question comes from, the fear is we apply for the grant and the loan, we get them, and now we've got a $6 million shortfall to finish. Where does that money come from? So I get leery or worried, if you will, when it comes to projects like this, and we don't have finite numbers, yet we're applying for the money that may not be enough. So that's a fear. So what happens when that happens? How do we finish it? Where do we go from there?
It's very common, Mr. Mayor, for projects like this to have those factors impact the project, without a doubt. Generally speaking, with regard to those studies that we're talking about, they will help us by building in some of those factors with regard to the numbers that they put together. And indeed, we will make that very clear with regard to our funding partners, the state, the business council, and so on, that those factors are part of this as well. Because inevitably, there's going to be a little sticker shock, as there was when I read this memo for the first time. And so we're going to try to capture that as best we can. If indeed, despite our best efforts, those numbers still don't play out to our benefit, the business council is also used to the idea of coming back when, as well as SLIB, when in fact these escalations are beyond what we anticipated originally.
Lisa?
We have a couple of questions. So we do the infrastructure, but then you're going to build back essentially as part of the land as you're going to add that back into it. So we're going to get reimbursed, correct? Is that what your line of thinking is?
Mr. Mayor, Council, let me take a shot at that. And if I didn't quite crystallize what you were asking, give me another try. The idea is that with respect to the loan repayment, for example, whatever size that ends up needing to be. We anticipate that through the proceeds of the land that we sell, that we would use that to pay off our obligations on the loan side of our request. Indeed, there's gonna be match components as well. And we're gonna try to make up those match components as best we can. And where those cash requirements are needed, we will, take the same approach to meeting our cash obligations also.
Somewhat what I was talking about, but not exactly. So basically you're going to create a lot for somebody to bring something in, say a hotel. In order for that hotel to purchase this property, then that comes at a price. So it's the land plus all the developments, the roads, the streets, the gutters and everything else. So the lot might be $400,000, whatever, I don't know. The cost would be to purchase that, which then essentially the city will get paid back. So ultimately, for the most part, we shouldn't really be out any money.
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, that's the idea. That's right. I would hope that our exposure would really be based upon how quickly we can transition the land to the private sector and developers that have ideas in mind to put stuff there. So you're right. That's our hope. That's what we're shooting for. And I would say with regard to the improvements that are made in the area, that indeed that'll be brought back to us, hopefully to the extent that our exposure is zero.
Just as a follow-up, my concern, I feel like we should have been doing a lot of these studies last year. Because I feel like we're kind of behind the 8 ball on this, is because the sports ranch has broke ground. And it's just like, if this takes a year and a half, then the sports ranch is gonna be built. We don't have the hotel space places for all of these tournaments that, like, I don't know if I'm the only one feeling that, but it just feels like we're behind the 8 ball on this one. And so I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one that's thinking that, but I feel like we need to kind of expedite things a little bit and not drag them out.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Counselor, I happen to have the same interest of having things done yesterday, so I share that anxiety. But the reality is, if we want the money from the state, we got to follow their timelines. And they are what they are. So we're going to do our best to try to bring as much money to the table as we can. Try to help the developments on the other side of this project area as well with funding requests that we want to make to the state too. And with all that, I'm hoping that the timing will work better than maybe what we're feeling anxious about right now.
Council Paul?
Thank you. I have a question for Carter. By my estimation, this seems to be one of the most compelling projects for a community readiness grant, or potentially business readiness grant that I've seen, of any, that I've seen. I'm wondering if you can help contextualize it a little bit though. When did we last apply for a community readiness or business readiness grant, and what was the scope of that project?
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, the last time we made any pitch to the Business Council of any kind would have been 3 years ago when we proposed to the Business Council some improvements along the river, kind of in the general area around First and Poplar, to try to get some infrastructure development in there to spurn private development and so on. That project was certainly a lot less in its scope and smaller, but evidently not compelling enough to make the deal happen. I agree with you. I think that this is much more transformational. I think were it not for the development of the sports ranch, we wouldn't even have this opportunity to have a conversation that has any traction at all. And so it's a really nice synergy, if you will, that I hope we can package real nicely for the business council to bring them on board.
Please.
Thank you. That was my recollection as well. And I hadn't remembered being successful with any of these pitches in my tenure on council. But I feel really good about this one due to the synergistic nature of it, the Catalyst project that's already up there. To me, this would be a real win for us because we have the opportunity to, this is a large project, but we've got the opportunity to get a chunk of funding to essentially increase the value and the developability of that plot of land for the city. So to me, it's our best shot at getting this up and off the ground. So I'm very supportive of moving forward with the application to the council.
Thank you. Councilor Bond?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is back to your question, Mayor, about the cost overruns, and maybe forgive me if you mentioned this, but I noticed that there's about 20% contingency built into most of the construction costs, I'm assuming for overruns and.
Correct, Mayor, Councilor, correct.
Yeah.
And so that's why 20% contingency was put in there because
Yeah.
it is the unit pricing there that was put in are for current costs.
Yeah.
That is to cover any escalation or unknowns that could be there.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify.
Councilor Kathy?
I noticed that there was a lot in here about the streets, the sewer, the water. What about power?
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, the challenge that we have with power is that power lines and power improvements and so on are not assets that the city will ever own. And so therefore, my impression is that that type of development will not be something that we can make application for because there won't be assets that will become publicly owned. And so unless we are directed otherwise, and certainly that could be possible, we are not going to include that within our scope and what it is that we apply for. Now, without a doubt, as it relates to the sports ranch side of things, they too have really solid estimates with regard to what it'll take to lay power lines and natural gas lines and those kinds of things. And I would suggest that if indeed the business council doesn't mind including those kinds of assets, they've got numbers already that can be plugged into the application. And then I would suggest we do the same on our side of the equation as well.
As a follow-up, the reason I'm asking that is I didn't want to see us go up there, put in the sewer, the street, all of that kind of stuff, and then have gas and power come in and start having to bore or cut or new asphalt and all of that kind of stuff. Because we see that every day. And normally before you would put in your curb gutter and asphalt, all the rest of that stuff would be put in. So that's something that I think we need to be considering. Otherwise, yeah, we're gonna be tearing up new streets and things like that as they go forward.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
I agree.
Councilor Gamera?
Thanks, Mayor. I apologize if I wasn't tracking this either in our discussion that we've already had this evening or through the memo, but the estimated cost schedule on page 37 looks like $14.7 million in total proposed development. We're seeking a $5 million grant and $5 million loan. So does that mean the other 4.7 million we'll have to come up with by other means, or I guess, can you explain to me, Carter, logistically with the sale of land, how we're juggling those? Sounds like kind of three different pots. There's a grant, there's a loan, and then there's another portion that we have to come up with. How do you see that working, like in real time?
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, that's a very fair question. The hope is that with respect to the net that we can cast, that indeed we can look at a myriad of programs and options that are available through the Business Council. We know that community readiness has a baseline available of 5 and 5. We're also told, however, that if the application is compelling enough and we have the right partners in mind and so on, that indeed we may be able to ask for more and essentially elevate again into another grant program that would make additional funds available. So, our estimates are at this point opinions of probable cost. Our studies are gonna, flesh that out further. We may be high, we may be low. And particularly as it relates to including the ranch side of things as well. We want to be as comprehensive as possible, but accurate as possible, and try to get whatever program come to our aid as much as possible. So, yep, you're seeing a delta there. And certainly, I think the city is going to have some skin in the game when it comes to a loan package or a cash match. But at this point in time, we really need your green light to move forward and pursue everything that we can. Because this step is actually the first step we have to take pursuant to the ground rules of the game.
Thanks, Carter. A couple follow-up.
Sure.
Our memo states the economic impact and density of use proposed for this area will provide a substantial ROI. Does anybody, what sort of research or information do we have at our disposal right now to, I guess, inform that statement? Do we have our hoteliers in town? I would love to have seen some information about what our current supply is, what our current demand is, the expected demand after the construction of the sports ranch. And so I'm just curious, do we have any sort of information do we have leads on businesses such as like a single destination retail outlet that has expressed any sort of interest? Do we have anything to help inform like what the, leads are in that area?
Mr. Mayor, I'm kind of looking at Ms. Powers here to see if she minds my putting her on the spot because she wasn't planning on speaking. And she hasn't given me a bad look. Oh, that wasn't bad. Oh, I read that wrong.
If that's a bad look, that's my kind of girl.
Do you mind if I implore upon some of your data?
Certainly.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman. So to address your question, I think you're wondering about the economic impact of the halo. And we do have studies that indicate that within 2 years, I think, of the sports ranch opening, that our hotel rooms will not be adequate. Remember, the sports ranch will be ramping up in the demand for hotel rooms in the first year, which it is opening hopefully January of 2025. So 2025, we should be fine. The National 9 may actually get some occupants out of this, but at some point in 2026, 2027, the estimates are there that the existing hotel rooms will not serve that supply. As far as the cost, I think it would be, from our way I would probably look at it, is what could you sell that land for now, unimproved, versus after this investment, what can you sell that land for as part of a fully developed commercial park or whatever it ends up being once you guys determine the feasibility of the master plan. And having dabbled in this area, we have seen, even with the costs of the utilities, things like that, unless you can find a private developer to come in and do this for you, and you sell the land for $2 a square foot, the way it is now, you are going to realize a benefit for that, and you price that accordingly. And you have lots better experts on selling unimproved land. But I think that would be the analysis I would look at. And to address that, you do have some time before the hotel demand is going to outweigh the existing supply.
Thank you. Could I follow up before you get too far? Thanks, Ms. Powers. I was just curious, it sounds like there was some sort of study or projection or something done maybe in regards to the feasibility of the sports ranch in regards to the demand and supply of hotel rooms. Is that information that was in your guys's, is that publicly accessible? Can I find that somewhere?
We have not updated the demand for the change in anticipated use. The operator is still looking at, with the addition of the turf piece on the side, the number of events that will occur in the first year versus the second year. So right now we have data that is a little dated, but that was made available to the city. That outdated information is available. And I can get that to you as well. I would hesitate, I mean, it is pre-turf, and when we really expanded the scope of use of this facility to, you know, include wrestling and dance and cheerleading and go way beyond courts, the potential for those additional events also increases. So it would be truly dated information.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your impromptu cameo.
Happy to get back in line, but I have one more.
Yeah, please, by all means.
Thank you for that information, by the way. I'm really excited about this, some of my colleagues. I like this master plan. Some of the public feedback I saw after it was kind of first publicized and the first couple times we've talked about it is, people seeming to think that this is just a large retail park or something like that, but I was glad to see it sounds like it's informed by the work that the MPO did in regards to the public feedback was they don't want the development in this area to compete with existing businesses. There's a consensus, it seemed to be through all that public feedback, through all those public forums, that outdoor and indoor rec should be a component of it. So I was glad to see the master plan carved out a good portion of that for that. The single destination retail, we don't really have much in the way of that, so I don't think it'd take away from like downtown retailers, but the master plan does, I feel like, leave a lot of opportunity open for some of the smaller retail. And so I guess some of my questions I was probing for, the only hesitation I have, it's a really cool vision, but the only hesitation I have is this concern, and I think I've voiced it a few times, about urban sprawl and just making sure that we don't develop past our, what we can support, because during my tenure on council, our foremost struggle has been to take care of the infrastructure that we already have. And so I guess I'm just looking for more information to make sure that we're not contributing to urban sprawl, that we're not kind of getting out above our skis in terms of the infrastructure we can support and the infrastructure that is justified by our population here. And so I don't have anything more specific to ask in that regard, but I do, as we talk about this more, I'm going to be looking to reassure myself that, whatever developments occur in this area is not going to take away from the downtown core, is not going to take away from a lot of the energy and development we've seen on the east side of town. I don't want to see other existing businesses suffer and, we lose them through attrition just because we develop in this area. I think that would be a shame. And so that's just a concern I have in the back of my head. I don't know if anyone else shares it, but I'll certainly be looking for more information along those lines as we, continue this conversation. So anything that can, be helpful in that regard, whether it's hotel lodging, supply and demand, or just if there's any constraints that we as a council are going to put on development in this area. I'd love to have that conversation. I guess is the moral of that story.
Just like to address what Kyle just brought up. I think that's a really appropriate conversation to continue to have anytime we talk about development. Getting into economic development was my first foray into serving on any public board or getting into, sort of community involvement at all. And I have on numerous occasions pushed back on the notion of development for the sake of development. I don't think that's a valid strategy to take. Also, a strategy that I've seen a lot that I've coined shiny object syndrome, where we just chase whatever the next shiny thing is, and put our eggs in that basket and try to run with it. I've seen that fail a lot of times, and I over the years that I've been involved, have become very wary of that scenario, and I think that we should continue to be sensitive to the issues that Kyle brought up here. I think that in this case, the reason I feel, I guess, compelled by this project, one, I think that, not all, I've pushed back on a number of business park concepts as well, and that if you build it, they will come sort of mentality. The reason I feel particularly enthusiastic and compelled about this development, probably above and beyond any particular project that I've sort of had my fingers in over the years, is that is the synergy with established assets, particularly for the city. We've got the event center, we've got trails, we've got Wild Sports Ranch. So to me, it is one of the most interesting places to have developed in the city in the coming probably decade, I would say. And I think being thoughtful, which is why I pushed for a master plan of many months ago, was because I wanted to be really thoughtful about the development and not just sort of let it unfold in front of us. I wanted to be thoughtful, and I wanted to imagine it in a way that was a little bit more creative, and avoided some of the things that you brought up, where we're duplicating, efforts of hardworking, entrepreneurs who are trying to create their thing, in a different part of town, and really try to create something that was a little more focused and a little more, took advantage of what types of things were already happening in that area. So I think that's what you indicated is the whole purpose of sort of having the plan that we developed or are continuing to develop, pursuing this grant. I think you made a case for us pursuing this, is because that gives us continued pulse and oversight in this development. As we continue to build out the assets there, we can be more selective about, we're not just trying to offload land for the sake of offloading land. We're trying to really be thoughtful and curate a package up there that attracts a certain type of entity that would be synergistic rather than unnecessarily competitive with other things that are happening in other parts of town. So I think my point is, don't know if that answered or put your mind at ease at all, because I'm certainly not the singular authority on this issue, but this to me feels significantly more thoughtful, well-developed, and comprehensive than many other efforts that I've seen and even been a part of. And additionally, I think your points are really well taken, and I think we should continue to keep that in our sight as we continue to go through this process, because I do think that is all part of a thoughtful approach to this.
Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Pollock hit the nail on the head as far as a number of things I want to say. And so in terms of what I should say, I think in regards to Councilor Gamros, very well made points, is that of emphasis here, being emphatic. Were it not for the development of the sports ranch, I would not feel comfortable bringing forward an application to the Business Council or anybody else with the scope that we're talking about. Because indeed, we are talking about ancillary business that supports a private development that is underway and happening. It's not betting on the come. It's not waiting to see if it's going to happen. Dirt is broken. Pipes are laying up there. We've got that happening. And so in my opinion, this is the step we need to take if indeed we're going to accommodate private development in the area. The other thing I would say too is I would caution you about taking too strident of a position of not having competition in any corner of this development with any other business in the downtown or on the east side or anywhere else in Casper. Because I would tell you that will probably lead to a non-development for the most part. If you handcuff yourself too tightly with regard to a non-compete position to be taken with regard to this development. That to me says we should not have a restaurant in that space anywhere because we've already got restaurants in the community. We've already got restaurants in the downtown, for example, and so on. And I don't know if that's realistic or incentivizing for the development world to try to accommodate. Same with hotels, although we know that hotel space is probably been understood that more is going to be needed. But there will be others as well, other private businesses who are going to want to come into the area that may in fact have a competitor within the city limits of Casper.
But I'm with you. There does need to be a balance, but we can only go so far. It reminds me of a development I just saw over in South Dakota where I was yesterday, and a guy built the most beautiful home on the planet. He didn't buy the lot in front of him, which he could have, and now somebody has built a house right in front of him and taken his view of the mountain. It's gone. And the guy was just frustrated, and he's kind of unloading on me, and I'm like, why didn't you buy the lot? Well, I didn't know somebody was going to build there. Well, isn't that a bummer? What made me think of that while you were speaking or while Kyle was speaking is that land's going to be for sale to the public. We have absolutely no business saying, well, we shouldn't put a restaurant there because it might hurt downtown or whatever. Too bad. That's called free enterprise. It's called doing your thing, and anybody can buy that land and do whatever they see fit with it. So I'm not afraid of the competition part of it. I think the sports ranch is going to bring more, obviously, than what our town can support anyway, as far as rooms and places to eat. Because on any particular weekend when we've got something going on downtown, you cannot get into a restaurant and you can't find a room already. It's already like that. So for me, I just don't see that as being an obstacle to our development, but that's just one man's opinion.
To your inherently negative situation for any local businesses, we're not suggesting that only out of town or out of state businesses can take advantage of the development in this area. Just as easily, a local entity that finds this attractive and compelling can open an additional location, can move their location, can be a part of this development, and I hope they will. So I think that it, while it, potentially presents a competitive situation, it also presents a new opportunity for any local businesses that may want to participate or feel like this area is well suited to what type of business they're engaging in. So I think it's both. It's not strictly this or that. I think there are elements of both of these things that I hope many local businesses may find plenty of opportunity up here as well.
Thanks. I appreciate everyone's perspective. I'm glad to hear that I'm not totally off base in some of my concerns. I do agree with Councilor Pollack that the master plan that we have in place, kind of the research we've already done, does make me feel better and more informed going forward. It's not just a shiny object, we build it and they'll come. I totally understand the synergy with the sports ranch, and so that makes me feel a lot better about it. I do just, I got that worry in the back of my mind that one of the unintended side effects could be that we offer so much in the way of services up there that it becomes very easy to avoid going to the rest of town. It would be, again, a shame if we offer so much up there that these tourists can find it very easy to spend their weekend up there at the tournaments and not have any reason at all to come south of the interstate. I think that would be a shame if that were the case, because our community, there's so much to offer in the rest of the community. I totally understand the free market perspective, and competition does, have its value, but still a concern of mine that we'd have folks coming in on I-25, spend the whole weekend up north of the interstate, and then they leave the way they came, and they had no reason at all to go downtown or to the east side or anywhere else in the rest of town. So just something I hope we continue to be mindful of going forward. But point taken on some of the observations and perspectives y'all have shared.
Vice Mayor. And I think that I'm gonna be very quick on this. I think it's gonna target a certain group of people that are here on the weekend. Sometimes I did a lot of traveling for sports with my son. We came down there, we didn't do a lot of touring, did our thing. We stayed close by the gym, by the structure, got our food there, stayed at the hotels there, did our thing and got out. And we didn't spend a lot of time and I'm saying that's not gonna happen, but it's also a lot of things that do happen. I think we're broad enough in the development within our community, and we offer a diverse opportunity for people to experience all of it. They come for different reasons. This is just going to be one more addition to that. And I don't think it's going to take away from downtown. I think it's just going to be in real niche there, where people that are participating in the sports, they're participating in the tournaments, are going to be able to go there, be able to participate, stay close. It's going to be real convenient. That's kind of how I hope to see how it's going to play on. That's how a lot of these tournaments and a lot of these things do work out when you see them in other communities as well.
Well, and just to piggyback on that, there's not a lot of spectator room in there. It's not like the event center. So people are going to be out and about and hopefully patronizing a lot of places in our community. And I understand your point, Councilor Gamrot. It's scary to me when I see we just closed 2 more Hardee's restaurants and we lost another one downtown. And, every time we lose a business, that bothers me, because it's jobs that we just lost for people. It's places for people to go when they come here. Those are scary things. Our mall is all but decimated. Those kind of things bother me, and I am fearful and mindful of those things. I don't know how you balance that. I'd like to think that the extra people that's going to bring to town will help actually support and further help some of our other businesses. That's the hope. But I guess, time's going to tell. So, but I do appreciate looking at it from both sides and being mindful of and trying to, to do as good of a job as we can, but we also don't want to alienate, another business from coming in either. So I guess we'll have to see how it plays out. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay. All right. Shall we move on? You need some direction. I'm assuming, is everyone okay with, moving forward with, the application to the Wyoming Business Council? Jenna, Lisa? Okay, all right. Then you have your directions. Yeah, very good. Thank you, Tasman, for being put on the spot with us. Thank you for that. And Liz, thank you, and Cindy for your good stuff. Let's move on to, I have a feeling we're going to see Zalima now.
Like it.
Rec Enterprise Business Plan, Part 3, Ice Arena and Rec Center, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You're right. This is the opportunity that we have to come to you and get your direction to implement business plans that we've, given you some exposure to up until now. The Ice Arena and the Rec Center are 2 of those facilities we'd like to cover tonight. And with your blessing from here, start the actual implementation phase of what it is that we've discussed with you thus far. And so if I could turn the time over to Ms. Lopez, I appreciate it.
Ms. Lopez, welcome.
For having me back again. I'm going to start with the Ice Arena and just reintroduce a few members of my staff. So Chad Green is our Ice Arena supervisor. Bill Moya is the recreation manager. And then when we talk about the rec center, we will talk to Jennifer Harvey. She's the recreation supervisor. Also with us, in case you have questions regarding the progress of some of the fundraising efforts, is Pat Bauer with that group. And so start out with just a very quick
recap. So what you're seeing on screen was the final slide of the presentation that I gave back in November of 22. And it summarized the strategies that we planned to employ at the ice arena to reduce our expenses and improve our subsidy position for that facility and that operation. And so since that time, when you graciously gave us thumbs up to explore some of these things further, we have been able to implement a few, we've been able to further vet a few, and maybe even come up with some additional solutions. And so I did want to sort of recap how we finished off fiscal year 23. So back in November, I presented a cost recovery projection that showed our budgeted FY23 and sort of an optimized plan for how I thought we could meet our cost recovery goal, which for the ice arena is 65%. So I am happy to say that we definitely exceeded what was budgeted in FY23 in terms of revenue for that facility, thus lowering the subsidy. We ended out the fiscal year right at 64%, which is just 1% shy of our cost recovery goal for that facility. But as you'll see on the next slide, is an improvement over time where we've managed to reduce the subsidy at that facility year over year. Honestly, pretty much since Chad Green took over operation of that facility. So we're pleased with the progress so far, and with, you know, the forecast and the opportunity moving forward. On the right-hand side, what you're seeing is our FY24 budget. And so this is the current state as it is budgeted in FY24. You will see on the bottom right that our cost recovery as budgeted for FY24 is only 60.3%. Part of that is that the junior hockey club, when we created our operation budgets in March, had not committed to coming here to Casper. And so of course, those agreements have been finalized now, and we know that for sure they will be here in fiscal year 24. And so if we add that $20,000 in anticipated revenue, that improves our budgeted subsidy to about 63.3. But when we created the budget, that was not part of the budget because we didn't have a firm commitment at that time. So I just want you to keep that in mind as we move forward into the 5-year plan. And so this is really the meat and potatoes of what I'm trying to present and inform you of and get feedback. And so for this facility, I did feel compelled to create 2 5-year plans. One for what we estimate we can accomplish with a single sheet of ice, should the second sheet not be successful. And of course, the second one would be what we think we can accomplish if a second sheet of ice is indeed constructed with the help of our fundraising partners. And so implementing some of the strategies that we talked about, of course, the rec hockey leagues and tournaments under a single sheet of ice is not a strategy that we can employ because we're maxed out. We can't add tournaments. We can't add leagues because we have no ice time to offer to add those services or those events. And so we were able to identify that we can, through ActiveNet, pass on credit card fees to the customer. Of course, the ice arena accepts all forms of tender, and so we feel like passing those fees along is an appropriate thing to do, and you know, essentially it becomes a convenience fee. I will be bringing forward in the very near future amendments to agreements that you will have to accept if indeed you approve of us moving in that direction for this facility. And of course, then the junior hockey club. And so you'll see that I went ahead and put the $20,000 that we expect to receive from the junior hockey club in FY25, although that will actually be realized in FY24 as well. But I added it here because it was not in the FY24 budget, so that you could see the impact that that has on the overall subsidy of the facility. We have been able to secure the special malt beverage license that's required for us to sell beer out of our concessions, and Chad has gone through, revamped our concessions menu, and is ready to offer a little more robust menu in addition to alcohol sales at our concessions. And so we do expect that will yield some very positive results, for the ice arena moving forward. In terms of improving and increasing advertising, sponsorships and naming rights, we're this close, and I know you've been hearing that for quite a long time, but to finalizing an agreement, hopefully with OVG 360, to help us to solicit those corporate sponsorships and naming rights, and bolster, support the revenue stream there at the ice arena, which happens to be one of the more popular and in-demand facilities in terms of corporate sponsorships and the interest there. So we do believe that will garner some positive results for us. Improving website marketing and particularly online sales capability, again, for season passes and which you can actually do through ActiveNet now, but we still think that there's some opportunity if we can improve our website and some of our marketing to increase revenue, get the word out about the facility, the rentals that we offer, all of those kinds of things, and bolster revenue in that way. Of course, constructing a second sheet of ice would be an FY 25-26. That in itself does not generate the revenue. It's the additional space that comes afterwards that does. And so, but under this single sheet model, of course, nothing benefits from that project. And then the last one is evaluate modified admission and ice rental rates. And right now, the intention is that we will evaluate admission and rental rates in fiscal year 25 and then again in fiscal year 27. And so you can see we estimated approximately a 5% increase in rates. That's not set in stone. Certainly we will do comp comparisons and see how our rates compare to other ice arenas in the region and make sure that it's appropriate. But in general, to keep up with inflation, you're looking at about a 5% every couple of years, 4 to 5%. So that's what was plugged in there. And so as you can see, really, we're going to hover right around that 65% mark. I feel very confident that we can meet our cost recovery goal most years. But I don't know that we're going to be able to move the needle much beyond that because we're just at capacity in terms of the services and the offerings that we can provide. Unless, we have kids on ice until 2 a.m. I don't think it's very advisable. So, do you have any questions about this model? Right now, I'm factoring in a 3% annual inflation rate over time. If inflation is kinder to us at 2%, you see that makes a little bit of positive difference. Certainly, if we suffer much higher inflation, something at 6%, then that's a sad story for us. But we did try to factor in, increased cost year over year due to inflation.
Questions for Zulema? Anyone? I think they're intimidated by your choice.
Mr. Mayor,
Just very, very comprehensive.
Very comprehensive.
Mr. Mayor,
Sir,
this would probably be a question more for the city manager than for Zulema, but have we had any kind of an update on the fundraising for that second sheet of ice?
well, I think Pat's here for that, isn't he?
Certainly, Howard is here and can give us an update if you want that now, or I can go through the second sheet, 5-year plan, and however you want to handle it is fine with me, Mayor.
Why don't you go ahead?
That's why he was here.
Why don't you go ahead and do your.
Go ahead, do your
second
thing.
sheet, and then we'll have Pat come up.
Yeah.
Okay, so this projection, of course, factors in construction of a second sheet of ice. Construction that we're estimating would happen in fiscal years 25 and 26, which presumably could be as early as July of 2024 through June of 2026. And so again, expanding that rec hockey leagues and tournaments will become possible once we get a second sheet of ice and have another sheet. And keep in mind that the numbers that you're seeing here are quite conservative, and they came right from the feasibility study. So I didn't make these numbers up. The consultant gave us figures that they felt were definitely attainable and admittedly conservative with regard to what we could expect to see. But that's where that $5,400 comes from. An increase in FY 27. We expect that, once the second sheet is fully operational and we're getting tournaments in there, we'll meet capacity again, and it'll be very marginal growth beyond that. So that's why you see an entry in FY 25 and not necessarily, excuse me, 27 and not necessarily beyond. Credit card fees will stay the same. Of course, we will be realizing those improvements in FY 24. Junior hockey club, again, with the addition in FY 27 of about $5,200, because with the expansion will come dedicated locker room space for a junior hockey club, in which case we expect to charge them more rent on an annual basis for their facilities. And again, that 25.2 is what the consultants estimated the revenue could be for a junior hockey club in our area. Expanding concessions, including alcohol sales. So again, you see that small progression through the first 2 years, and then quite a large increase because we expect to have a number of additional tournaments, and that ice occupied a majority of the year and could bolster concessions. In my presentation last year, when I showed you essentially a zero subsidy for a second sheet of ice, I said I believe that we would have to double concessions, and this reflects essentially a doubling of concessions as it is today by that time in FY 27. Increase advertising, that would stay the same, although we do expect that if we have a second sheet, there is more space to sell in terms of sponsorships and naming rights, and that second sheet construction should garner additional interest in having corporate sponsors at that facility. Improving website marketing just progresses throughout the time. Again, constructing the second sheet, and that isn't necessarily in and of itself going to create any revenue, but we should see increases in revenue post-expansion in FY 27 and 28. And this particular one, sorry, I had to make notes for myself so I wouldn't forget what I was actually forecasting. So this, the FY 27 number is using study forecast for growth in programming with hurling, post-expansion, and then by but again, hard figures that we utilized from the study to help us identify what we could expect in programming increases post-expansion. I think it was youth hockey, hurling, and there's one other category that was factored in there. And then evaluate and modify admission and rental rates. Again, we expect that will skyrocket post construction in FY 27 with that second sheet, especially in terms of ice rental rates, because we will have more ice to sell to all of our user groups. And then non-ice rentals, right now, the proposal for an expansion includes a dry land training, and we could certainly utilize that space for hockey training, but we could also utilize that space for other uses and be able to rent it year round for multiple purposes. And so again, hopefully this shows you that I do believe that with a second sheet, we get very close to zero subsidy by 28. So, Mayor, councilors, I would entertain any questions that you have for me, for my staff, or for Mr. Bauer.
Well, I think we should probably hear from Pat. I know Councilor Kathy brought it up, but I think we're all interested in how the fundraising's going. And I mean, it's a pretty big chunk of money. So I think we're all, and I think we had put a 18-month timeline on that. Was that what it was? So I think we'd be interested to find out where we're at.
Sure.
Welcome.
I found out I was gonna be here about 2 hours ago. I don't have anything formal. You know, right now it's going great. I can say that we actually just started formally kind of soliciting less than basically 5 weeks ago. I can say that we hope to be at about 70% of the fundraising efforts on our end by the end of September.
70?
Yeah.
Wow.
So our proposed, and I left it in my truck, but we have our proposed packet that we're using for marketing material. Our goal is to hit 10 million is what we're publicly asking the community or private donors. And so, yeah, we should be hopefully pretty close to hitting that 70% by the end of September. So.
That's awesome.
I can't give you the specific number right now because there's some of our donors who we've already met with that are kind of doing some of their own budgets. And then there's some stuff that I believe William was going to talk to you guys about tonight still. So I'm not going to get ahead of that, which is also going to help us get some more solicited numbers from some of our donors. Right now, our goal for our committee and our goal right now is we're meeting with about 1 to 2 private donors a week on those efforts. So.
Any questions for Pat before so we don't make him run back and forth? Thank you for that information.
Yeah, and thank you guys, appreciate it.
Mayor, Counselor, so what Mr. Bauer was referring to is the fact that, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the donors, the fundraising group does believe that they have a donor or donors that will fund 100% of the design. They feel like having a solid design with a really thorough cost estimate will only bolster their fundraising efforts. And of course, we know design comes with all of the drawings and conceptuals, and when people have something tangible to look at, they get a little bit more excited about it. And so we do have the design RFP about 99% done and plan to publish it this week.
I'm assuming that Jennifer's end of this is probably bolstered with the second sheet too. I'm assuming it's gonna help the entire recreation center in ways that we haven't even fathomed yet, right?
Excellent point, and it was hard to build that in the projections, and so it is not factored in there. But certainly the more people we have coming to the 3 enterprise facilities, the more we should expect to see just traffic through the entire building, and that, you know, people come to the ice arena or to the rec center or to the aquatic center, and then they're like, oh wow, I didn't realize that you had this and this and this, and then it draws more attention to the facility as a whole, for sure.
The only reason I asked that question is I wanted to see if any of that had been projected in, and you said it has not, so.
I did not include it in the recreation projections.
Good. Any questions? Anybody else? You have anything else, ma'am? Okay.
Present on the recreation operation separate and specific.
Sure.
Okay, so again, just a reminder
Thank you, Pat.
of where I left you in terms of the recreation center fund and our proposed strategies for reducing expenses and increasing revenue. And this fund is really tricky in that historically we've had that indoor sports, that league component within the recreation fund. Of course, athletic fields were part of the parks general fund budget. And so one of our strategies here that we discussed with you and has since been implemented is that we would extract that sports component out of the recreation center and create its own fund so that we could really evaluate the costs and expenses associated with league sports and athletic maintenance and make that fund solvent on its own. Rather than relying on what ended up really being an additional subsidy at the recreation center to support those efforts. And so you'll see in some of the 5-year, well, in some of the historic projections in the 5-year plan, that it's been really up and down. And some of that is because funds were intermingled and then separated and then remingled. And separated again, and now moving forward, it will only be rec operations. Certainly the league sports will pay rent for the space that they use in the gyms and things like that as appropriate. Jennifer, when she is holding summer camp, pays the ice arena for time on the ice. She pays the aquatic center for time in the pools. So really it's more of a business model where she's getting paid to rent the space for the activity that's happening by the appropriate fund where that's incurring that use. And so But so, we've tried again to take your direction and really evaluate these further, vet these strategies, and now can show you some of the results of our efforts. And so I am very, very pleased to say that in FY 23, we actually ended out the year above our subsidy goal of 50% at the recreation center. We ended the year at 52.4%. That was largely attributed to miscellaneous revenue. A lot of that was new endeavors in advertising for our rec guide, as well as really pushing online sales, which means that some of the reimbursements that we received were larger than we had originally expected. You will note that that isn't necessarily reflected in the FY 24 budget for a couple of reasons. One, as I've mentioned, when we created our operations budget, we haven't had a fully developed fiscal year, and so it's hard sometimes to estimate the impact that some changes will have before that fiscal year finalizes. But also, we just weren't convinced that those were sustainable things that we're going to see year over year. And so we wanted to give it a little bit more time to see, okay, will this continue, or was this kind of a one-time anomaly that isn't sustainable over time? And so, FY 23 ended very, very strong, and we're really proud of the efforts that Jennifer and her team have made to make that happen, as well as Paul Zawada and his team, because in 23, those funds, operations were still sort of meshed, right? So in 24, we move forward with only recreation operations. There's no sports leagues factored in here. They're a separate fund with their own, but I highlighted the yellow fields where our budget projections were quite low, and in fact, lower than what we actually realized in FY 23. And so I really have no reason to believe that those figures are sustainable, and we should continue to see those numbers into the future. And so I really believe that we're going to finish much stronger than 40.9, but this was our very conservative approach to the fiscal year budget, considering the dramatic change in the structure of the fund and the operations that were historically within that fund. Okay, and then this is our 5-year projection. And again, fiscal year 20 was also, COVID. Well, I guess it was pre-COVID. No, it ended up fiscal year 20 was COVID. So, we had definite impacts even into fiscal year 22 from COVID, just in the reduction of people wanting to come play, contact sports, do things indoors at the recreation center. We're definitely coming out of that, and we're pleased to see that is kind of rebounding. Again, you'll see fiscal year 23 ended really strong. Not sure at this point how sustainable that is, and so you do see a dip, but I think a positive trajectory moving forward. Beautiful thing. Okay, so some of the subsidy improving strategies that we plan to implement at the recreation center, we were able to complete the fitness room, specialized fitness program and programming partially in FY 23. In fact, August 15th, we're moving some new equipment into the facility. So part of the recreation center and one of the gyms will be closed so that we can get that equipment moved in. Finalize the fitting of our new fit room, where you see cycles, spin bikes and things like that, as well as some new equipment in our weight and cardio rooms. And so that's very exciting to be able to get that done. And right now, we hope for a bigger impact than the very conservative estimates here, but we wanted to be realistic and make sure that it was attainable in terms of what we presented to you tonight. So creating the Sports and Athletics Enterprise Fund, of course, that has been completed, and the impact from that is decreased expenses overall for the Recreation Center Fund, also decreased revenues, but the expenses at least last year outweighed the revenues that we received from that operation. And so that is a positive impact that we'll now just continue to see year over year. Improving marketing and programs, classes, passes, rentals. Again, we're gonna hit marketing really hard. We were able to utilize the new communications team out of the city manager's office to help us with marketing for our 40th anniversary celebration. And that was very successful. We had a lot of visitors through the facility that day, and in fact, sold a number of passes through that endeavor. And so we're excited to be able to utilize marketing in that way in the future to just bring more people to the facility and so that they know what our actual offerings are. One of the large things that we're really focusing time on, and Jen is working really hard on this, and in fact got a grant from the Department of Family Services, is to expand childcare for facility users. And so that's not only enhancing or bolstering our current rec programs in terms of camps, so our summer camps, our winter break camp, our spring break camp, and then, you know, a few fun nights that we offer at the facility. It is also creating a space and offering a service where if adults are in league sports or they want to come in for a workout, there is a place that their children can go and be cared for while they're utilizing other places. I really do believe that that will be a really important offering to give to our adult users who have children. And so we expect some positive results from that. And through the Department of Family Services grant, we were able to work on a project to enclose the very front area where there's pool tables and TVs now in glass. And so it's visible from the help desk or the circulation desk. And we can staff people in there to utilize that as a childcare space. They're calling it the hub, right? So that's an exciting thing that will be happening in the very near future, and will again help us to expand that service. Passing on the credit card fees, again, is mostly done, and we'll be codifying that sometime in the coming weeks. Increasing the variety of specialty rentals. So right now we offer specialty birthday rentals. We have Nerf gun rentals and arts and crafts rentals. So you not only get the space, but you get some activities along with that. And so Jennifer and her team are coming up with some really fun, exciting new specialty rental ideas that will hopefully bolster our birthday party rentals or other rentals. She's trying to brainstorm some things for corporations to use as team building, and then incorporate those offerings as well. And so we foresee some positive results from that effort. One thing that we have definitely recognized in our community is the increased interest in outdoor recreation. And so we want to offer programming that supports that. I think some people are intimidated if they're not hikers or cyclists or mountain climbers or archers or things like that, fishermen. And so we want to offer a place where people can come in a controlled, safe environment and kind of learn the basics before they get out there and try those experiences themselves. And so we believe that offering that programming will be successful in the future. Restructuring partnerships to improve reimbursement. So that was really focused more on the athletic side or the league sports side. And of course, we've talked very recently about the Casper Rec Leagues Association and our restructured partnership with them. But we have other partnerships on the rec side as well with community groups and service organizations. And we will continue to look to restructure some of those partnerships just so that we ensure that our staff time is covered where we're engaging in activities for those organizations. Evaluating and modifying packages and rates. Of course, our rate increases, much like Ice Arena, we plan to do those in FY25 and FY27, and this shows 5%-ish increase to rates at that facility. And then the last two items are sort of a bigger vision, bigger ticket items, capital investments that we hope to make later on in the 5-year plan. Adding a multi-purpose gym essentially doesn't double our space, but it certainly gives us more space to expand our programming, which somewhat like the Ice Arena is becoming very stretched. I mean, most evenings we're at capacity with league sports. But we've got pickleballers who want to use more space. We've got other, rec groups that want to use more space and unfortunately, especially in the evening hours when it's most popular, we don't have that space to offer. So that would be an opportunity, to expand the facility so that we can fit in more programming. And then locker room renovations, potentially could come in FY 28. We really expect that the increase in revenue there would come more from adult memberships, and daily admissions rather than the entire populace that uses the facility. So, kind of a pretty conservative estimate of what we think we could achieve if we had a nicer locker room facility with some amenities such as an improved steam room, maybe a hot tub or something like that, to make it more appealing to the adults. And so that is our 5-year plan as it stands right now. And again, I entertain any questions that you have.
Questions, anyone? Can I ask you a question about the aquatic center? What's the roof replacement date to be done? When will that be reopened, I guess is my question.
Mayor and councilors, I'm actually probably going to defer to Phil Moya. There was a pre-construction meeting today that I was not able to attend because of a conflict. And so the aquatic center is closed.
Right.
And contractors were going to start work as early as tomorrow, if that's still the case. Word on the street this morning was that there was a possibility that the contractor believed he could get the project done in one phase. But I don't want to hold them to that because I was not there today.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, councilors, we didn't get to that portion of the meeting actually, though, but we are looking at reopening in January. The project is actually going to start as of tomorrow, and they'll start working on the supports initially, and then they'll start working towards getting on the roof and get those repairs done. They are toying with the idea of trying to be able to mobilize more crews to be able to see if they can get the slide, the HVAC, and the roof all done within the same time frame. And if they can, they might be able to get the project done within the first phase. They're just not 100% sure on that one yet.
That's good news. Thank you for that. Any other questions for Zulema?
We are doing the aquatics 5-year plan in early September, I believe. And part of the reasoning for holding off is to get a better idea.
Sure. Yeah, there'll be a lot of conjecture there, won't there?
Would be over the next couple of fiscal years.
Yeah, that makes good sense. Well, thank you very much for the information. Certainly appreciate it. It's the first time I can remember you not coming and saying, hey, I want money. So I'm pleased. I'm kidding, of course, but thank you very much. Okay, Mr. City Manager, let's move on to the speed limit ordinance modification.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. This is the conversation we want to have with you to see if indeed you had a tolerance for the idea of sort of internalizing, if you will, some of the decisions that are made with respect to regulating speed limits throughout the community. There are times where some of these adjustments are way more mundane and routine than perhaps elevating those discussions every time at the level of the city council would seem necessary to do. And so the question before you tonight is whether or not you have a feeling at all for entertaining the notion of relegating some of those decisions to staff at the staff level, or whether or not that needs to be at the council level every time. Certainly, if you do feel like that is something you're willing to entertain proposals on, we have some questions that we need to investigate as it relates to some of the legal recourses that may be available for us to entertain these kinds of ideas, and what potentially guardrails you might be interested in seeing, and so on, relating to these kinds of questions. So the police chief has looked into this quite a bit and, has some ideas that maybe, we could expand upon a little bit tonight to help you in, giving us this very conceptual green light potentially, this evening. So if I could defer to the chief with regard to that level of discussion, I'd appreciate it.
Chief?
Good evening, council, mayor, council. I'm grateful for this opportunity to kind of bring this topic forward. You're all well aware that currently enumerated in our city ordinances are the speed limits that are specified for very specific sections of our roadways. Any changes that need to be done to that over time as we develop crash data, as we look at our street engineering and our overall public safety goals, any changes are kind of cumbersome according to the current process. What we're looking for today is direction to initiate an in-depth study as to whether or not we can streamline this a little bit better so that we're far more nimble as a city as we address changing traffic conditions, traffic volumes, address the areas that are causing us more crashes. So there, in fairness, there are some legal barriers. The assistant city attorney has pointed out some conflicting languages within our statutes. But what we're hoping to accomplish is to streamline this process so that we as a city can be far more agile in our response to changing traffic flows in our community without being overly cumbersome, without having to specify with so much certainty in our individual ordinances, go through all those public hearings. We're looking to see if it's legally permissible and if council is amenable to the idea of streamlining this process. That's an overall view of it. You know, we're really just looking for the thumbs up to really delve into the legal parameters of what's available to us and if we can pull this off.
Well, and that's the question, simply. Are we, as a council, willing to give them the leeway to do the research and find out what, if anything, can be done when it comes to speed enforcement? I'm all for it. I don't know how you folks feel, but yeah. There you go. That was pretty simple.
That was the quickest 60 minutes we've had.
Well, as soon as I saw it on there, I thought,
seconds.
unless Chief's gonna ramble, this is gonna take about 3 minutes.
Since Zulema missed the opportunity.
No.
I need more money.
No.
Thank you, council.
Well, I'm just as used to you asking for it as she is, in fairness. All right, we are zooming through. That's how you slice 60 minutes into 5. It normally takes me an hour and a half to watch 60 minutes. So, all right, with that said, let's move on to agenda review.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, I am referring to your grid document, as you might imagine and are pretty used to by now. The big item for next week is certainly question as to whether or not you want to extend the 5th cent indefinitely, or at least push that proposal forward to the commissioners as it were via an ordinance. We also anticipate taking the preliminary steps pertaining to some of the ordinance changes relating to the TNR program. And as you might recall, we anticipate bringing a companion resolution forward by the 3rd reading of that ordinance, should it survive to that extent. We also anticipate your very first budget amendment and its preliminary step taking place next meeting as well for fiscal year 24. If I could direct your attention to the upcoming work sessions that are coming up. We anticipate hearing from the parking garage operator on the 22nd. We also anticipate the camping ordinance, which has been discussed quite a bit, and now you'll get to see what the extra recommendations are in concert with your homeless coalition, for lack of a better way to describe that effort. The follow-up items relating to the snow plow approach for the next season, which is fast approaching, will be entertained on the 22nd as well. For the work session of the 12th, not only will you hear business plan proposals for aquatics, but also get to entertain some conversation as it relates to Hogan and rates at Hogan. You can see what else we have on the agenda for some of the other successive meetings that we have coming up. I like to, however, direct your attention to the back page wherein we lay out the prospectus for your work sessions and idea topics over the next several months, just to be sure we're not missing items that you may want to see come forward in the near future or even in the long term that we may not have captured to this point. And that is my report, Your Honor.
I thank you, sir. Anyone have any questions or comments on the agenda? Good to go? All right, how about legislative review? Do you have anything on it, sir?
I do not.
Okay, very good. Anybody else? All right, let's go to council around the table then, Mr. Bond.
Just report that Brad, Counselor Haskins and I attended the municipal court liaison meeting yesterday. Had a nice meeting with the judge. She gave us some updates about some efforts she's making to, the court is making to address failure to comply, non-payment of fines and so forth. And talked to us about some periodic, very crowded hearing schedules for arraignments that is creating some scheduling problems for them. And I'll let Councilor Haskins fill in the blanks.
That's pretty much.
I know I'm missing something, so I didn't bring my notes. But anyway, that's all I have.
Okay, while you're on that subject,
Yes, sir.
though, I did want to throw out, I think if you look in your email, we have a new link now.
Yes.
For you to follow. Okay,
Yes.
very good. I just want to make sure everybody saw that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Kathy.
Yeah, sorry I missed your band Thursday night.
Oh,
Wife didn't want to go out in the rain, so.
it was beautiful that night, actually.
I figured, yeah. Anyhow, I have planning and zoning meetings Thursday night. Looks like we've got a couple of conditional use permits on the schedule, so ought to be fairly benign. There is police promotion Friday, 5:30. Congratulations to your people. Plan on being there, so. That's coming Friday, and then next week is bunches of meetings. Water, chamber, council.
All the things.
All the above and more.
Yes.
All right, well, thank you, sir. Councilor Haskins.
So, yes, we met with the judge and her email pretty much tells you everything we talked about. They're getting creative with scheduling and I feel like it's really sad, but yeah, they're super busy. So good, bad news, I think. Next week, it's third Thursday already. So by August, Jurassic Quest at the Fort Wyoming Center. Take your kids, see the dinosaurs. And then, of course, the following weekend is going to be the busiest Saturday in the history of Casper. Duck Derby, Billy Currington, everything next week. Other than that, I don't have anything of interest.
All right, well, thank you. That was easy and quick.
I tried.
Councilor Pollak.
See, I don't have anything. All my meetings are next week.
Wait, what?
Like second week, third week is my week, so.
Deal. Well, thank you. Councilor Ingebretson. Wow, this is just going fast. Councilor Jensen.
Think of anything? I think there's I can't remember the dates or the specifics on it, but a promotion for the police officers. Thing coming up, otherwise. Yeah, I appreciate, I'm kind of excited though about the rec center and their happenings of what they're gonna be doing and how inventive they're getting, innovative on a lot of that, so. I'm excited.
Has done a good job, certainly.
I think that's it.
Councilor Gamroth.
I just have one thing tonight.
What?
I know. I almost didn't have anything. This was a last minute addition, so. There's been some news, past few weeks, past few months about Rocky Mountain Power, and a nearly 30% rate hike. I think this last month there was a 7.6% energy cost adjustment mechanism, rate hike. And then, they're going to the Public Services Commission to ask for another 21.6 general rate case. There was a recent Wildfile article, I think Mikkel Scott is how you say his name. He's the executive director of the Council of Community Services in Gillette. And he was quoted in there and he talked about the fact that the ERAP program, Emergency Rental Assistance Program, had distributed $108 million to Wyoming households, since it was implemented, during the, onset of COVID. 6 million of that went to utility assistance and that just ended June 30th. So that source of assistance is not going to be available to people any longer. And then Wyoming LEAP, which I think we've been a part of forever. Did the water assistance program, but we've been doing the low income energy assistance program for a while. But even that program, which provides necessary assistance for people, only connects with about 20% of income eligible households. And so I know the Public Service Commission has a meeting coming up, the 24th. And I know the Wyoming Office on Consumer Advocates is kind of taking a position on this, but I guess I would just, I'm curious, Carter, perhaps you can remind me. I thought when we were talking about putting together the budget, we discussed the impact of hikes on our electricity bills. Did we not? Or am I misremembering?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor, we certainly did, but I don't think we envisioned this large of an increase.
Okay.
So probably not as big as perhaps what might come down the pipe.
Okay. When I thought I can't recall, I wish I could cite it. I don't recall where I read this, but I thought I remembered reading that small businesses, up to 80% of their expenses were their electricity costs. And so certainly, I think the city of Casper is a stakeholder in this discussion, us as residents, and our small businesses in town. I would just, with that Public Service Commission meeting coming up on the 24th, we have one more work session before then. I would love to have a discussion before then, if possible, about what sort of stance or what sort of ability we as a council have to contribute to this discussion. It's, very significant. And so I would just love to see what avenues or opportunities there are available to us to weigh in on this before this Public Service Commission meeting on the 24th.
Well, do we have some space on our work session in 2 weeks that we could devote a little bit of time to this to explore and find out if we do have some opportunities or some avenues to kind of help impact this?
Mr. Mayor, I would say absolutely we do.
Okay, let's go ahead and schedule that then if you don't mind. And we'll definitely do some research before then and hopefully have some information to share, and maybe we can collectively help our people our constituents by putting some pressure somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Is that it?
That's all I got.
Okay, I appreciate you. Thank you. Vice Mayor?
I don't have anything tonight. Wow.
I just have a couple things. I noticed Chief's here tonight. You were gone when we congratulated your department and your fine leadership in getting the first ever, being the first ever department in the state of Wyoming to achieve CALIA accreditation. So congratulations to you and to your entire department. That's pretty amazing. This Friday, I will also be attending the police officer ceremony. They will be honoring the promotion of Captain Jeremy Tremmel, Lieutenant Seth Wheeler, Sergeant Chris Henry, Sergeant Davis Romero, and Sergeant Michael Paschke. So if any of you folks can make it, it's at the Tate Pump House. I think it's at 5:30 on Friday. And then we're being inundated with a lot of FISTED stuff. I did a television interview that'll air at 10 o'clock tonight. The Channel 13, K2, I have one tomorrow morning with them. It sounds like it's getting pretty tough out there. So this is the time, I guess, for educating the public and helping them to understand why this is so absolutely vitally important to not just our community, but the communities that surround us as well. I'll tell you, it just won't look good if we can't get this through. I'm fearful. So just wanted to throw that out there. There was something else. This has been a busy week for me. Sturgis rally's going on right now, so there's a lot of motorcycles in and around town and out on the interstates. So look twice, save a life. And be well, have a great week. We'll see you next Tuesday for our regularly scheduled work session.
July 1st.
Yeah.
Even though the big service is pulled out, and then they're talking about 1% January 1.
So do you wrap this all back up?
Yeah.